Hi, I'm Dave. In today's lesson, we'll add local data storage and some other extras to our React Native CRUD app. I'll provide links to all resources in the video description. I'll also provide a link to join my Discord server where you can discuss React Native with fellow students, ask questions, and help each other out. Hey everyone, this React Native for Beginners educational video series is made possible by Zero to Mastery, also known as ZTM. I've been recommending ZTM on my channel for a couple of years now because ZTM has an amazing selection of in-depth, up-to-date courses. React, Next.js, Node.js, ZTM has it. Python, AI, prompt engineering, ZTM has it. Security, code interview prep, ZTM has it. When viewers ask me where they can go to learn more after completing a course on my channel, I recommend ZTM. And I always put links in my video description to ZTM courses, just like I've linked to ZTM's React Native course in the description for this video. After you complete this React Native course, ZTM's Complete React Native Developer is your next logical step. ZTM's course will reinforce the basics you learned from me and guide you through creating large-scale React Native apps that you can put in your portfolio and show confidently in a job interview. Look for the link in the video description and check out ZTM today. I've got VS Code open to the CRUD app to-do list project that we created in the previous lesson. And at the end of the lesson, I did mention that we would work on dynamic routing in this lesson, but I think I'm going to push that back to the next lesson so we can add local data storage first and some other nice extras to this app that we created in the previous lesson. Okay, let's get started by opening a terminal window. Of course, I've already got the project open here in the file tree to the left, but if you're not in the CRUD app directory here in the terminal, you want to cd into that. So cd CRUD app, or whatever you named that directory. And then once you're in that directory, we want to go ahead and start the project with npx expo start. Now, as always, this will give us the QR code that you can scan with your Expo Go app to check out the app on your mobile device. It will also give us a URL where we can open this up in the browser. So I'm going to press Control and click on localhost 8081. It'll start building the project here, and now we can open it up in the browser, just like you see here. And this is what we had last time. So it populates the to-do list with some example to-dos, and everything was working as far as the CRUD features. Now let's go back to VS Code and start adding some extras. Back in VS Code, I'm actually going to press Control-C now to stop the application because we need to install a new dependency. We're going to add a Google font. So I can type npm I, then the @ symbol, then expo-google-fonts / and this is where you'd put the name of the font you want. I'm just going to use one, and it's called Enter with an I, so I-N-T-E-R. I'll go ahead and press the Enter key, and that of course is spelled with an E on my keyboard, but they sound the same. Okay, now that we've installed the Google font that we need, let's go ahead and I'm going to press the up arrow twice to go back to npx expo start. Go ahead and restart the application, but I can close this window while it's restarting. And then I'm going to press Alt-Z here in the index file. So I'm in the index.jsx file that we have. I'm going to need to import that font here at the beginning. So I'm going to import, now curly brackets, and there's a couple of things I want. One is the font itself. So I'll say enter and underscore, whoops, just underscore, not a parentheses. And then notice we have some choices here already. So everything from 100 thin to 900 black. I'm going to go right in the middle. So enter 500 medium. Then also I'll put a comma and I'm going to import the use fonts hook. So both of those imported now, and we can use those below. So let's say after our state here for text and set text, we can go ahead and import, or not import, I'm sorry, we can go ahead and define now both loaded, comma, and error. And notice they're in brackets like we would with use state, but we're going to set this equal to use fonts, parentheses, and then start an object here, and then we'll type in our enter underscore 500 medium and put a comma after that. Okay, so now we have imported our enter 500 medium font, but what else happened here is a loaded and an error state. So we need to check those later on. So let's go ahead and scroll down just a little bit, we have our different to-do CRUD functions right here. And we don't have any use effect hook usage yet here. I was just checking. We just have use state imported here. Later on, when we work with local data storage, we will put in a use effect. And the next part that we put in here for the font, we just want to make sure it happens after the use effect. And since we don't have any of those yet, we can go ahead and put it right here. So I need to check the if loaded state. And so this is if it's not loaded and there is not an error, then we can return null. So we're just doing that to wait until the font is loaded, essentially. We want to make sure it's loaded. And of course, we don't want an error either. So if it hasn't loaded and there is no error, we return null. Otherwise, of course, we could use the error if we want to. And if it has loaded, then we're ready to use the font. And now we're ready to scroll down and use the font in our styles. So let's scroll down to our input text inside of our styles. There's the container. Here is the input text itself, and we can put in a font family. Let's put it right after font size. So font family, and then we'll say enter underscore 500 medium. And that's how we can use it in the style. So I'm going to copy this because we're also going to put it in one other space, and that is in the to-do item, I believe, or the to-do text. Let me double check. Yep, to-do text. So underneath the font size here, I'll just paste that line in as well. Okay, now just to make sure we have the font loaded in, and because we did add that new dependency, now we've added it in our code. Let's one more time, let's go ahead and open the terminal window with Control and backtick, Control C to get out of that. And instead of just restarting the server with npx expo start, we can also put a -C after that. What that does is clear the cache. So now it's going to clear anything out it might have saved, like the previous font, and it will start using the new one. So let's go ahead and restart our project with that -C flag to clear the cache. And here we've got the warning now. It said the bundler cache is empty, rebuilding. It could take a minute. It didn't, but now we have our QR code. Of course, we've got the URL once again. And I think we're ready. It says, oh, Metro waiting on it gave us, instead of local host, it gave us this expo here. So if we want local host, now we need to go into development mode, which it says press S to switch to a development build. So I'm going to do that. And now it gives us the local host once again. Okay, let's go back to our project. Let's reload. And of course, then we'll check out font to see if we can see the different changes here. Here it's quickly reloading. There we go. A small change, but I do like this font just a little bit better than what we had. Everything else is still working as expected. And we have added a Google font. And of course, you can look up Google fonts and you can add any one you want to the project. And now we're back in VS Code. Let me close the terminal window once again. We want to add a toggle so we can switch between light mode and dark mode in the app, or so that the user can switch between light and dark mode. So what we want to do there is first make sure we have two different themes, light and dark. So let's look in our constants directory and click on colors and see what's defined. This is like what came with the project, essentially. This is what they had previously defined. Let's delete everything here, line 8 and up. Get rid of those definitions first. Then after that, let's go ahead and start with some new definitions of our own. Text we're going to keep, background we're going to keep, icon we're going to keep. Let's get rid of the tint line. And then let's have one other line here, and let's call it button. Okay, for button, I'll put royal blue just so I have a value there, and I think that's the one we'll keep. Now I'm going to copy the light fields, Control C, and just paste them in here to the dark too, and then we'll change the values as we go. So for text, instead of a hex, I'm going to use just the color name. So black. Background is white, which the #FFF, that works for that. So we can just leave it like that. The icon, we're also going to switch to black, and we'll keep the button royal blue. So that's our light theme. Very simple. Now for the text in the dark theme, we'll go white. Background, now we can switch this to black. The icon will go red. And for the button, we'll switch this back to white. And of course, if you want to stay consistent and just use the keyword white up here, the name of the color, you can do that as well. So now we've got our light and dark themes in the colors TS file that's inside of the constants directory. Now we need to create another new directory. So let's do that. And I'm going to create it here at the same level that the constants is at. So that's inside of the CRUD app directory, not inside of the app directory. So now a new directory, and we're going to call this one context because we need to create a theme context and a theme provider. So this is going to be all in a file that I'm going to name theme context.ts. Oh, and I said TS out of habit or by mistake. What I meant to say was JS. So we can rename this and actually have this as a JS file because once again, we're not using TypeScript in this tutorial series, but you can if you want to. The project is already set up to use it. Notice we didn't even bother to change the extension on the colors constants file. It's colors.ts and it works just fine the way it is as well. Okay, now that we have our theme context file, let's go ahead and import, create context, and use state. And they're both going to come from React. After that, I want to import appearance. If you remember, we have used that before when we were detecting light or dark mode. And that comes from React-native. There we go. And then finally, we're going to import our colors that we just defined that are coming from. We need to go up one folder and then go into constants and then look for colors. There we go. Okay, now let's define our theme context. And so we'll say export const theme context. Set this equal to create context. Now parentheses and just put an empty object in there and that creates the context. After that, we need to create the provider. So we'll say export const theme provider. Set this equal to an anonymous function and destructure the children here. Now, if you're familiar with React, that just means the children components or the child components that will go inside of the provider. That's something that is very common in React. Okay, now inside of this theme provider function, we're going to define the color scheme. So we'll say const and have our color scheme and set color scheme. Going to set this equal to use state, and then inside of use state, we're going to use appearance and call get color scheme. So let me press Alt-Z to wrap that down. But what that will do is get the current color scheme for the system and pull that in here to the color scheme, either light or dark. Now let's define our theme. So const theme is going to equal, and this will be a ternary. So we'll look at the color scheme value, say, is it equal to dark? If it is, then we'll set the theme to colors.dark. And if it's not, set the theme to colors.light. Okay, now we're ready for the theme provider return. So we'll use the return keyword. I'm going to scroll for just a little bit of room here. And now we'll put the theme context that we created and say dot provider. Now let's set the value. So it's equal to two curly braces here. I like to use a separate line and I'll pass in the color scheme. I'm also going to pass in set color scheme and then also theme. So anything we want to get out of this provider, we want to pass in as a value here. Now inside the provider, we simply put the children. And this means it's going to wrap other components and the color scheme, set color scheme, and theme will be available in those components. For example, our index.jsx file will be able to pull these in because the provider is going to provide it to the application. Now, I say it's going to provide it to the application, but we actually need to put that in place as well. So let's go into the app directory and then into the underscore layout.jsx file. Here we've got a safe area provider already in place. So notice how it wraps around the rest of the application. We're going to do the same thing with our theme provider. So we'll import theme provider And we don't want the one from React Navigation Native. So we want the one that comes from, let's go up a directory and then look in the context directory and then get the theme context. That's the one that we need. So from there, let's go theme provider. I'll take the closing tag, put it at the end, and we have wrapped our application now in the theme provider, which will make those values available to us inside of the components that are inside the theme provider. And all of these, of course, represent the children as we defined here inside of the theme context dot provider in the return there. So now that we've done that, let's go to the index.jsx file, and we'll need to start at the top with a couple of new imports. Okay, the first import is going to be after use state because it also comes from React, and it's simply use context. Okay, now that we have that, we have one more separate import. So let's say import. Now this is going to be the theme context that we defined, and we can see it comes from @context theme context. That works as well. So now that we have both of those, let's define our context inside of the component itself here. So we've got the to-dos, set to-dos, text, set text. We've got the font loaded here as well. We can put this anywhere in here, really. It's basically another state. So let's go ahead and bring that in. It's our color scheme state. So we'll have const, and then we need color scheme, set color scheme, and also theme. And these will all be destructured from use context. And we need to pass in the theme context that we imported to the used context hook. So now we have defined those and we can work with them inside of the file. Now, before we start putting color scheme, set color scheme, and theme all in place in the file, let's import some icons like a sun and moon to use as we toggle the theme. And you have seen me look up different icons before, so you already know the site to go to from previous lessons for that. So I'll just save us some time and import the ones I've already picked out. And this is from Octacons. And now we want from @expo/vectoricons/octacons. Okay, now we can use those, of course, below. Let's scroll down in the component to where the return statement is, because that's where we start to see the header. So here's the input. Here is a pressable button, of course, that will add a new to-do. We want to put the toggle just to the right of this pressable button. So it's going to be another pressable. That defined, I want to call the onPress here, or at least define what happens when the onPress is triggered. And so for that, we're going to have an anonymous function. And inside of this, we'll call setColorScheme. Now, inside of setColorScheme, we can use a ternary. So we can check the current color scheme and say if it's equal to light, we want to toggle to dark. Otherwise, we want to go with light. So that will toggle between the color schemes there on this button being pressed. So now that we've defined that, let's also put in an inline style, just something simple here. Style equals a couple of curly brackets, margin left. So we have just a little bit of space between the buttons. I'll set that to 10, and I think we can close that out now. So we have our closing tag here for pressable as well. Now let's see what we're going to put inside. I guess I've got one extra line. Okay, inside of our button now, I'm going to start with the curly bracket here so I can put some logic. Once again, I'm going to check the color scheme. So now, if it's equal to dark, then I'm going to have a return here. Well, not a return actually, it's a ternary. And we will return at that point the octacons. And let's set the name equal to moon. Set the size equal to 36. Let's set the color equal to the theme we defined, .text. So we're pulling that in from our context as well. Now, to avoid one of those warnings we've seen previously in the browser, we'll set selectable equal to undefined. And after that, let's set a style also and have that equal to a width of 36. Okay, I may have a typo in there somewhere because I see this extra. Oh, I know what I'm missing yet. I'm missing the last part of the ternary. It's not really a typo. It's just we haven't closed out our ternary statement yet. So now I can copy this octacons because we're going to have basically the same thing, except we need to switch the name and make this one sun. So we're going to either have the sun or the moon icon depending on the theme. And that's what will be returned, and the pressable button, of course, will let us toggle the theme. Okay, with those now in place, we still need to apply the theme to our styles. Right now, we just have it set to a static black mode here. As we see, background color is black. So let's go ahead and update everything we need to in our styles. So this should be theme.background. Pull in that. Actually, we need to go ahead and set a function here too that I didn't, as we have in the past. So let's do that. Instead of styles equals, we'll say function create styles. Now we'll pass in the theme and the color scheme. And then inside the function, we will return our stylesheet.create. And so now we have the theme.background here. We'll scroll down to the input, and where the color of the text is white, here we'll say theme.text. Scrolling just a little bit more for the background color on the button, this is where we'll say theme.button. And now for the color on the add button text, well, we don't have anything actually in the theme for that. So what we're going to do is define it right here. We'll say color scheme, and if it equals dark, then we'll say, okay, this is going to be black text. If not, then we're going to say this is going to be white text. Remember, this is the text color on the button. So the button itself would be white if the theme was dark, for example. Next, let's go down to the to-do text itself, and here the color is set to white. I think we can say theme.text once again. And finally, it looks like we need to close out the function with our curly bracket right there and save. Now the function is in place, but we haven't called the function create styles above. So let's go back up somewhere towards the top and call our create styles function. I think we want it to be after we know the font has loaded for sure. So let's put it here. We'll say const styles equals create styles. We'll pass in the theme. And then we'll also pass in the color scheme. Okay, now with all of that in place, we should be able to go to the browser, check the application to see if our toggle button is working. So let's pull that up. Here's the application. Here's our toggle button. We're in dark mode, so we see the moon. Let's click on that. And wow, that is bright. But yes, we're now in light mode and we see the sun here. So if we click on that again, we'll go back to dark mode. Let's open up the DevTools. I'll use Control-Shift-I, clear that out for now, and look at the mobile view here in DevTools. And I've got this set to an iPhone 6, 7, 8 Plus. In previous lessons, I've shown how to set this up to possibly show the frame, just so you could look at this in the browser as well. But remember to always go ahead and scan that QR code and look at it on your mobile device too. But once again, just checking to see how it all looks here in light and dark mode, and everything is working as we expect it to. We're looking at the website for React Native Reanimated, and one of the things that can make your app really stand out are just some nice subtle animations to make things seem very smooth and flow like a native app. And React Native Reanimated is already installed when we install that Example Expo project. So we've already got the dependency in our project now. So let's go back to VS Code and put a nice little animation or two in place for our to-do list CRUD app. Okay, back in VS Code, let's scroll up to where our imports are, and we can say go after the fonts that we imported here, or the font, if you will. Let's go ahead and import animated and put a comma, and now we need curly braces, and we'll also import linear transition. Both of these will come from React-Native-Reanimated. Okay, now that we have the imports, let's put these in place. And really what's going to happen here is the animated part has its own flat list. So it's going to replace the current flat list that we have here. So instead of just flat list, it's going to be animated dot flat list. And then there's a couple of things we can provide as extra props here that will help us animate our flat list. So the first one we want to have, the main one that does the animations, is item layout animation. And let's set this equal to the linear transition that we imported. Now the other thing that I want to put just while we're here is called keyboard dismiss mode. Let's set this to, I'll go ahead and delete the curly brackets. We can just set this equal to on drag. So what this does is when you have the keyboard popped up, let's say you were entering in a new to-do, so the keyboard pops up on your mobile device, you can just drag down on the list and the keyboard will disappear. And of course you can try it without this in there to see the difference. Now I can't show you that in the browser, I don't think. This item layout animation we should be able to see in the browser as well. Okay, that's it. We've applied both. Let's go back to the browser and take a look at our application over at localhost 8081. I'm going to reload just in case. And now let's add a new to-do and see if we see an animation. New to-do. Yes, a nice little slow animation there. Okay, let's go ahead and delete an item. And a nice little slow animation when it's deleted. Okay, so when I put this in, of course, you don't see a keyboard pop up here. So if you go ahead and scan that QR code that we have in the terminal window and check out your application in your mobile device where you'll have the keyboard displayed here as you want to enter a new to-do, then drag down on the list and the keyboard should go away. And that would be the keyboard dismiss mode. And now we're finally ready to add local data storage to our application. And this will let us persist that data between the times we start the application and pull those to-dos back up. So the ones we checked off will remain checked off. The ones we've added will then be there when we open it back up and so on. I am in the Expo docs under store data, and they give several options for what we want to do. Let's scroll all the way down here to async storage. This is the one we're going to use, so let's go ahead and click on that to go to the dedicated website for async storage. And then, of course, you can go to the Get Started page, and it tells you how to install the dependency that we're going to need. So that is what we're going to copy right here, go back to VS Code and install. And back in VS Code, I'm going to press Control and the back tick to open up a terminal window, Control C to stop the application. Then I'll just right click and it pastes this in for me. You may need to do it a different way depending on what computer operating system you're using. But I have just pasted that in, so I'm ready to install React Native React Native Async Storage. So let's go ahead and press Enter. Install this into our application. It will be listed in the package JSON file, and then we'll be able to use it. So now let's go ahead and restart the application with npx expo start. I don't think we need the -c to clear the cache, but you can use that anytime you want to, or you think you're seeing something that you shouldn't be seeing in the application. That would be a good time to clear that cache out when you restart in dev mode. Okay, we've got everything up and running, but we don't really need to go back and look at the app yet. Let's just scroll to the top and import what we're going to need here. So I need to import async storage. I'll just add that below our animated imports here. So import async storage. That's going to come from React Native Async Storage /async storage. So we see it right there in our list. Okay, now that we have that, we also need use effect. So let's import that after our use state and use context. They both come from React, as does use effect. Okay, we've got the imports. Now let's scroll down and put a use effect in place. Now remember, we want the use effect to be before we check to see if the fonts have loaded or not, or there will be a problem. Okay, this use effect is going to be for loading data into our application. So right now, we're importing data up here. We're importing data from our data/todos file that we have, And that's just our example data. That would be fine to start out an application with. Maybe you'd want to have 5 example to-dos in there and just name them example 1, example 2, and so on, just to show users how it looks with a little bit of data in there before they start adding their own. Of course, it would be easy to delete just about 5 example ones as well when they first started using the application. But after that, you want to use the data that they have entered and saved or removed and so on. So let's define a function inside of this use effect. We'll call it const fetch data, set it equal, need the equal sign here, equal to an async anonymous function. And inside this function, we're going to have a try. And of course, with a try, let me scroll for some room here, is also going to be a catch. We have an error. Inside of here, we'll just console.error and pass in the error. But inside the try, let's define our JSON value, and we'll set this equal to await async storage that we've imported dot get item, and we will look for an item called to-do app. So that would be what would be saved in the local storage, and we're retrieving it if it exists, and we can check that. But now we want to do just a little bit more because this is the JSON value. So you need to parse that as well. So let's say const storage to-dos equals a JSON value. And if that's not equal to null, then we'll call JSON.parse and we'll pass in that JSON value. So we'll parse the JSON we got. And otherwise, we'll just return null. So now we've either parsed our JSON or we have a null value. So here we can say if we have storage to-dos and storage to-dos has a length, then we can go ahead and set the to-dos equal to storage to-dos. But now I also want to sort the to-dos and make sure that we always have the newest to-do on top and not the bottom. So I'm going to put in that sort function, and then I pass in A and B, and then we have B.id minus A.id. And we really only need to do this when we load the to-dos back in. This won't need to be something we do when we save the to-dos to local storage, because they could be saved in any order, but when they're loaded back in is when we would want to sort them. But else, here, let's also have another set to-dos. And this is essentially going to be, okay, we didn't have the storage to-dos, so maybe this is the first time the app is ever opened, and we have that example data. So this would once again then be data.sort. And here would be A and B. We'd have B.id minus A.id. So the difference here being we're either using the storage to-dos or we're using the data that comes with the app right at the very beginning. Now we still need to call this function inside of the use effect. And then we could put in the data that is imported as a dependency. We really only want this to happen, of course, when the application loads. So you could leave it empty. The data is not going to change. It's that static example data, but it is a dependency really for the use effect. So it does go in the dependency array if you want to put it there. Now, since we're loading the data inside of the use effect, we want to come up here to this use state and remove the data that we were putting in there and just put an empty array inside of the to-dos and the set to-dos use state to start out with, and then it will load when this use effect is called. Okay, so that's all good, you say, and that's how we load the data in, but now what about how do we save data to local storage? And of course, how does it save the latest data? Well, we need a second use effect for that. So let's go ahead and define that now. So we'll have use effect. Starts out the same with our anonymous function. And it also has a dependency array. I'll scroll it up here just a little. And inside the dependency array, we're going to be looking, whoops, I need to be inside the dependency array. We're going to be looking at whenever the to-dos state changes. That's when we'll want to call this, so we get the latest information set inside of this use effect. So this won't be quite as big actually. We'll define store data, set it equal to an async function. Now let's have our try catch. Once again, we can just catch and then console error. But inside the try portion here, we want to once again define a JSON value. Now we'll use JSON stringify. So JSON.stringify, and we pass in the to-dos. Then we will await async storage and call the set item method. We want to make sure we name this the same. So once again, to do app. But now the second param here is the JSON value that we're setting inside of local storage. So let's go up here and make sure we name that the same. Yep, to do app and to do app here are the same. So that's all it takes to set it. Now, of course, we need to call that down here as well. So we call store data. And this happens anytime the to-do state changes. So this gets the latest update set into our local storage. And with that complete, let's go to the terminal window once again with control in the backtick. I think this might be a good time to go ahead and restart the application with npx expo start, and to be safe, use that -c flag to clear the cache once again, because now we're changing a little bit about how we load the data. Let's make sure everything works as expected. We also want to test this out not only in the web, but also make sure you scan the QR code and use your Expo Go app to check this out on your mobile device and make sure it's working as expected. Okay, I have loaded in the example to-dos, and so they are just like they are in the file right now. And of course, we can check one off like pay the bills. Let's go ahead and add a new to-do for Dave. You could put your name in there, whatever you want to do. We've added a new to-do, we've checked one off. Let's delete, finish the presentation. And now, if we reload the app, it shouldn't go back to the file, the original list. It should still have the new to-do for Dave here. It should have the other one checked off, the one deleted, and so on. It should look the same here. After I reload, I've still got new to do for Dave. The other one is still checked off. The other one is gone, and so on. So our state remains the same. And that's what we want to make sure happens both in the browser and on your mobile device. Okay, everything is working for me, including local storage, as you see both light and dark mode here on each side of the screen. So there's one thing I want to call your attention to. Do you see the difference between the images besides light and dark mode? Notice on the light mode, you can't see the battery status or any of those things across the top. That's called the status bar. So let's fix that quickly. Back in VS Code, I'm going to scroll to the top where we've imported several other things, and I'm going to import one more, and that is the status bar. So import status bar, and that comes from Expo status bar. Okay, after that, let's scroll all the way down to almost the bottom of our application here in the return, close to the end of the safe area view. Now, just above that closing safe area view is where I'm going to put the status bar. And we'll set the style of the status bar equal to a ternary that's going to check the color scheme. And here we kind of want the opposite. So if it's equal to dark, we want to return light. Otherwise, we want to return dark. And then, of course, we need to close out the status bar with the slash and the arrow. And that's all it should take. So now let's once again check the app. And as you can now see, when I compare the images left and right with dark and light mode, we can see the status bar with the battery status and everything at the top in both color schemes. So that was the final thing we added to the app today. But in the next lesson, I promise we will look at dynamic routing in React Native with Expo. A quick shout out to my patrons. Holy Coder is a progress provider. Sean Lynch is a senior. And my junior patrons, Programming Polyglot, Isaac, Will, Ernie, Stacy, Abe, Javier, Michael. Thank you all so very much. You're helping me reach my goals. Remember to keep striving for progress over perfection. And a little progress every day will go a very long way. Please give this video a like if it's helped you. And thank you for watching and subscribing. You're helping my channel grow. Have a great day, and let's write more code together very soon.